Traffic, inshallah. Need some traffic control lights here. Inshallah. All right. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. So we've covered several hadith about zakah. And today, inshallah, there's going to be a seminar about Ramadan, about fasting, and about how to pay zakah. All the detailed questions that people need. Does anyone know what time that seminar starts? 11:30. Jabir will always know. Alhamdulillah. So 11:30, inshallah, the seminar will be here. It's about pre-Ramadan, about learning about fasting in Ramadan and about zakat, inshallah ta'ala. So, it is for free, yes, alhamdulillah. So inshallah, the zakat is not free. Learning about zakat is free. But then when you pay zakat, you have to pay actual money. So the next chapter is Babu wujubi sawmi Ramadan wa bayani fadli siyami wa ma yata'allaqu bihi. The chapter on the requirement of fasting in the month of Ramadan and the explanation of the virtue of fasting and the things that are connected to it. So Imam al-Nawawi begins this chapter by mentioning some verses in the Quran. And what's interesting about Ramadan and about fasting is that it's a pillar of Islam. Fasting is one of the pillars of Islam. And if you go and you look in the entire Quran, you find all the verses about fasting, with the exception of, Laylatul Qadr, all the verses about fasting in Ramadan, just in one section. Surah Al-Baqara. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to put all of it in one specific place, one specific location. Whereas when it comes to other things like zakah and things like that, spread throughout the Quran in many different places. So the first verse we'll look at, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. You who believe, fasting has been prescribed for you the way it was prescribed for those before you, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you might acquire taqwa, so that you might become righteous people. You might become people who are conscious of Allah, or people who are, another translation is fearful of Allah. So we have to understand this concept, and I'll spend just inshallah a little bit of time on this verse and the next verse tomorrow, because I'm going to be out of town for a week inshallah, so I won't be able to cover these ahadith. I'm going to Korea and Japan. Jabir has a way of asking the questions very directly, mashallah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a verse that we're going to be hearing again and again and again. And what we need to understand is that every single time you hear something, don't have the mentality of, you know what, I already know that. I've heard that verse before. This is the mentality of a lot of people. So, they hear a verse, even if, imagine someone gave an explanation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Recite Surah Al-Fatiha every single day. I already know that. So yeah, you know it. But there's two aspects of learning something or listening to something again that you already know the exterior of. Number one is that it's a reminder. So maybe you need that specific thing in your life at that moment in terms of what you're going through. You need a reminder about something that maybe you've forgotten. And so there's a reminder about something that you already knew but kind of went away from your mind. And the second thing is, and I'm sure this has happened to some people, is that when you're going through something in life, and then you go through the same exact verse that you already know, or the same story that you've already heard many times, you're able to connect and relate to that specific story in a completely different way because of what's happening in your life at this moment. So if you've heard this is a very, and it happens to all of us, it's a very dangerous mentality to fall into. I know that verse. I've heard this verse before. It's okay. It's okay. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ask us to recite Surah Al-Fatiha 17 times? You've heard it before. You know it before. Every single day you hear it. But there's something very important in there. So this verse, no matter how many times you hear it, just try to take something different from it. Or maybe now try to reconnect it to your own life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you who believe, or believers, or everyone who's claiming to be a believer, kutiba alaykumus siyam, fasting has been prescribed for you. Kutiba. Kutiba means to write something. Kataba comes from writing, but it also means to prescribe something. So this writing and prescription sounds almost like, in modern terms, like a doctor writes a prescription for you. Something is not right with you. You need help. You've got issues going on in your life. This year has been rough for you. This is the prescription that you need. Fasting has been prescribed for you. Who's the prescriber? Allah. Allah is giving the prescription. This is what you need in your life. كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. The way it was prescribed for people of the past. You're not the first ummah. You're not the first people who have ever fasted. Their fasting was a little bit different, which we'll cover in some detail. But you're not the first people who've ever fasted. So this is not just special for you. This is a universal way of depriving yourself temporarily to gain some increase in benefit. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So that you might become people of taqwa. Now the taqwa here means you might become conscious and mindful of Allah, aware of Allah in everything that you do. Something that it's not just a status that all of a sudden you're in and you're in and you're stuck in there and you're like, I have reached the stage of taqwa. It's not the way it works. Being in a state of mindfulness or consciousness or awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a state that fluctuates. And it's a state that you need to try to get into and remain for as long as you possibly can. So he's saying you should be in a state where you're going to be generally being classified as a person of taqwa. And the wording is لَعَلَّكُمْ. And la'alla means that perhaps you might achieve this objective. You might fast and you might not achieve this objective. And if you don't achieve it, it's our own fault, right? If we're not able to achieve it. But this is a formula that Allah has given us for fasting that is going to help us get to that goal, but it's not guaranteed. But it's not that hard either. He didn't say layta. So if you study Arabic grammar, the difference between layta and la'alla. Layta means, it's like, if only that could happen. La'alla means it's actually possible. It's something that is hoped for, it's something that is maybe probable, and it's something that's very achievable. So it's very achievable, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of this verse. So this is a first verse that we should keep reflecting on about fasting when the month of Ramadan is coming and preparing in the month of Sha'ban as well, inshallah. Those of you, just to check real quick, how many of you got the announcement about the seminar at 11:30 that's going to be happening today? Who actually saw an announcement? Yes, we need massive work on our marketing. So here's marketing, 11:30 today, inshallah. The seminar is going to be at 11:30. Pre-Ramadan, we're going to cover Ramadan, fasting, and zakat, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to understand these things and apply